Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Finance and Resources Committee. The probably will be a bit briefer than usual today. But we've got certainly quite a substantial Finance and Resources meeting coming up ahead of us in September, 13th of September. But can I welcome you all along? Can I just say, first of all, I know that Councillor Forbes is not able to be with us, and Councillor Illingworth is substituting for him. Also, Deputy Provost Parrott is not able to be present, and I know Councillor Sheila McCall is substituting for him. And I also got apologies, probably you did too, Kirsten, from Colin Stewart. Any other apologies? No? Right. Okay. As per usual, is there any declarations of interest? There being none, then we shall move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, and that was on the 26th of April, 6 weeks ago. You'll notice in the minutes we did include and made reference to, because Alistair Bailey had raised it, and the minute, in fact, of 1st of February was amended to make you point out very clearly, not just that he declared an interest, but he left the room. I'd also point out today, on the minutes here, we refer to revenue budget, capital monitoring budget, and also treasury activity. Now, with this meeting, it's always the case, and with finance team preparing the year-end accounts, we will take these matters which we normally do at Finance and Resources, and that will be in September. But can I just ask, in general, on the minutes, are there any comments in terms of matter of record or any observations? Okay, then we move on to outstanding business statement, item 4, and you will see there was only one item, and that was in respect of the Integrated Joint Board, and that action has been completed. Does anyone have any comment? Okay, we'll now move on then to item 5, the first of our 2 substantive reports today, and this is on providing authority to write off debts and obsolete stock. It's important to do this in particular for to provide the year-end accounts, which will then go to Audit and Risk Committee at the end of this month. So could I ask Stuart McKenzie to introduce and speak to this report? Stuart.
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, Councillors. The report seeks approval to write off identified debts and obsolete stock. This is required to allow appropriate adjustments to be reflected within the Council's unaudited accounts for 2022-23, which will be considered by the Audit and Risk Committee later in June. The recommendations set out in section 4 of the report for each source of income are made following exhaustion of the debt recovery processes available to the Council. However, should further information become available to enable the cost-effective recovery of debt, it will be written back on. Appendices 1 to 5 of the report summarise the reasons for the proposed write-off of debt. I would ask members to note that the proposals within the report relate to several financial years, not just 2022-23. The proposed write-off of debt, therefore, generally represents a fraction of 1% of the total generated for each source of income over several years. Whilst the report, by necessity, is focused upon those amounts which have not been recovered, the Council continues to collect the overwhelming amount of the increment bills. The in-year collection level in 22-23 for Council tax was 97.95% and for non-domestic rates was 97.91%, both improvements upon the year before. The collection level for housing rents in 22-23 was comparable with the previous year at 98.61%. Maintaining in-year collection levels is not only important for cash flow purposes, it limits the amount of new debt accumulating and, as members will appreciate, historic debt becomes more difficult to recover over time. Given current cost of living pressures, the Council can, however, reasonably anticipate challenges in sustaining present collection levels. Colleagues are committed to engaging proactively with customers and supporting them to maintain payment, and members will be familiar with the work of both the Council's welfare rights and tenancy teams in supporting individuals and families. As set out in Section 5 of the report, it is proposed to maintain the policy approved last year of waiving charges for adult care and support services for people seeking asylum in Perth and Kinross with no recourse to public funds and for refugees. It is proposed that this policy be reviewed on an annual basis. Happy with colleagues to take questions, Convener.
Thank you, Stuart. Do we have any questions? I'll take Councillor Rebick, followed by Bailey Ahern. Councillor Rebick.
Thanks very much, Convener. I'm wondering if we have any specific amounts in terms of outstanding debt on school meals and breakfast clubs, please.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Rebick, for your question. And can I thank you for the advance notice of the question, because that level of detail, I couldn't profess I would have that to hand otherwise. So for clarity, and these figures are included within our sales ledger amounts within the report section, appropriate section of the report. As at the 31st of March 2023, we have £56,893 of outstanding debt relating to school meals and breakfast clubs. So that's both categories of debt. We've provided for £44,022 of that total. So that leaves a balance outstanding in respect of school meal and breakfast club debts of £12,871 at the 31st of March 2023. Hope that answers the question.
It does, thank you.
Bailey Ahern, followed by Councillor Drysdale, and then Bailey, Ulster Bailey.
Thank you very much, Convener. My question is on paragraph 4.24, which was the write-off of housing benefit overpayments. I was a bit confused in the figures. So if I'm right, at the 31st of March 2022, we had a bad debt of £745,682. But for that financial year, we're only writing off 36,763 for 22-23. Out of the overpayments of 351,000. So two-part question is, what's happened to the 745,682? Is that still regarded as a debt? And how do we get ourselves into £351,000 of overpayment in a financial year?
I'm going to go to Stuart first of all on that, and then it may be that one, even two others come in. Stuart.
Thank you, Convener. I wonder if colleagues from local taxes might wish to comment, or my colleague, Mr. Walker.
Hello, I'll try and answer that, Bailey Ahern. Okay, so the write-off debt of 36,763 is specifically for 22-23, which is obviously detailed there. The provision for the bad and doubtful debt and housing benefit overpayment being the 744,000 as at 31st of March. I might have to get my colleague Scott Walker to assist with that part of it. But what I can clarify that the value for the overpayments in total in 22-23 was 351,000, and the proposed write-offs in total for all the years represents only 10.47 of this amount. The recovery of the housing benefits are the ongoing process, which was actually recovered in 22-23 was £347. sorry, £347,000. The figures that are shown are for a number of years, and the figure of £347,000 is for 22-23. I think the person in the report, sorry, the person writing the report is trying to highlight that it's a small level of write-offs in comparison to everything else. I'm not sure if that's answered your question. I've perhaps picked it up incorrectly.
It does in some way, but if that represents only 10.47%, the second part of the question is how do we get ourselves into that position where we've overpaid so much in housing benefit?
Okay, an overpayment of housing benefit happens when we've awarded housing benefit because somebody's entitled to housing benefit because they've applied and it's based on their circumstances, and it's paid. It's paid out to the customer or indeed to the landlord. However, when a benefit entitlement changes, for example, it reduces or it is cancelled out altogether, that becomes the debt that we've got to collect. It's a very difficult debt to collect in that it is from mainly the most vulnerable in our society, and in terms of the current cost of living crisis, it isn't tended to be deemed as a priority debt. So debts such as rent, for example, will take priority over collection of housing benefit overpayment. It's something, the housing benefit overpayment is something that happens naturally. Basically, housing benefits awarded and then it is reduced or removed because the circumstances has changed. Does that help?
Yeah, that does. So
Yep.
it's just the first part about what this 740,682 is.
Okay. If possible, can I maybe hand over to one of my colleagues in finance to help with the figure for that, if that's possible?
Thanks, Lynn. Yeah.
Thanks.
Are you there? Yeah. Scott?
Thanks, convener. So, Councillor Ahern, the 700, as Lynn said, the £745,000 is built up over a number of years. We look at all of the debt we have. We make assumptions in terms of when and if we will collect that debt. So it's really it's a total figure over a number of years, and it is adjusted accordingly each year, depending upon what we're doing each year. I mean, I'm happy to go through it with you in detail offline if that would be useful.
Yeah, you can do. It's just that with such a build-up and we're only recovering the amount for 22-23, I just wonder at what point do you then write off part of that 745,000 if it's over a number of years, and then just go, right, we're not going to recover it.
So we take advice from the experts in housing benefits, as we do with all the write-offs across this report. We take advice from the services, we take advice from local taxes, and we will apply that provision when it is best to do so.
Okay, thank you. I'd be grateful if you could give us a breakdown of that after this. Thanks very much.
Okay, Bailey Ahern, and yeah, I think clearly Scott will take you through some of the more detailed aspects. Could I turn now for a question from Councillor Drysdale, and then with Bailey Bailey next. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, convener. I'm wanting to refer to Appendix 4, the irrecoverable housing rents debt written off, and in particular the much larger amounts quoted for 22-23, which I understand from the report is basically a kind of catch-up, a thorough review that has been undertaken during the last financial year that perhaps hasn't been undertaken during COVID and immediately before then, and that's all understandable. I'm just looking to understand whether we are seeing a trend here in terms of, for example, the going away figures and the sequestration figures, whether we are seeing trends here, or whether this is just a build-up of an underlying steady state of write-offs that we've had over a number of years. And I suppose the follow-on from that is going forward, assuming normal working conditions and no pandemics and all the rest of it, that if there's a more regular review on an annual basis, and that there is the ability to follow up and try to recover debts sort of in the year in which they're building up, that perhaps going forward these figures could be reduced in some way. Is that a fair assessment, or am I being hopelessly optimistic? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Elaine Ritchie is going to answer the points you've raised. Thanks. Elaine?
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. You've summed it up quite neatly. There's no trends. It was the backlog as a result of COVID, and hopefully we have done a thorough review and we've enhanced our procedures and put quite a lot of support in this area. So you've actually answered your own question. It is as a result of COVID. We, in terms of that build up, and we've now reviewed our procedures and we've put a wee bit more focus on this area going forward. We've actually reviewed all our rent processes as a result of the impact of cost of living as well. So you've answered your question.
There we are. I don't think anything further from Councillor Drysdale. Could I ask Bailey, Ulster Bailey, to be followed by Councillor John Duff?
Thank you, Convener. I was concerned a moment ago to hear the total level of school meals and breakfast club debt. Obviously, that's a new figure coming to us today. My question is about how that arises, because my two children, one in primary setting, one in secondary setting, all of their school dinner monies have to be paid in advance and have been for at least the last 3 or maybe 4 years. Is this debt maybe historical and predates the point where we switch to a prepayment model, or are there other routes where people can still accrue a debt in those areas even today? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Bailey, and hopefully I'm as adept at answering the question as Councillor Drysdale, who's doing his bit for the circular economy, by asking and answering the same question. I asked the question after we chatted about this, and I believe that that we as an organisation will not refuse a primary school child who presents for a meal. So if they present for a meal and it's not prepaid, we will still give them a meal. And I think that's where part of the build-up is, but I'll pass it over to somebody else. But I asked the question because we chatted earlier.
Right, do Stuart or Scott wish to add further?
Thank you, Convener. In addition to Councillor Lane's comments, Bailey, there was an element of historic debt in that. So yes, it's a combination of current but historic debt as well. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge amount, and it's spread across the school estate, as you can imagine. But there's an element of historic debt in that.
Okay, thanks. Right, next is hold just a minute. Is in fact I've got Councillor John Duff, followed by Councillor Cuthbert. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. My question is also around about Appendix 4, which is on page 27, and it's just around about the situation. I wondered about, you know, evictions and whether there are evictions that take place as a result of these irrecoverable housing rent debts. And beyond that, if these people come back to us looking for some kind of tenancy and they have a recorded debt, what happens there? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Once again, Elaine Ritchie. Elaine, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Thank you, Councillor Duff. In terms of evictions, last year we lodged 24 notices in court and we had 10 evictions. 9 of them were for rent arrears, significant rent arrears, and 1 was for antisocial behaviour. So in terms of eviction, it's last resort, but where there's significant arrears and we've exhausted all avenues, we will seek to go through the eviction process. When somebody does represent, we have to enact the homelessness legislation and we have a duty under there to assess those individuals. So often they could be seem to be intentionally homeless, but we still have a statutory duty to provide them with temporary accommodation and source alternative accommodation, and we'd work with them through our support workers to get a repayment plan in place, a budgeting plan. So we would work with the individual and be tailored to their support needs and requirements.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Councillor Duff, you happy? Right. Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you, Convener. It's page 21 that I'm looking at. It's to do with the VAT. Two parts to the question. The first bit is, my understanding from what's been written here is you can't reclaim VAT on bad debts until after 6 months. After 4 years, you can also not reclaim the VAT. So I'm just wondering if that's correct, then do we always try to get the bad debt written off within 4 years so we can reclaim the VAT at 20% or thereabouts?
Stuart.
Thank you, Convener. I suspect colleagues may want to add to this, but yes. You'll notice that in respect of sales ledger debt, quite a lot of sales ledger debt becomes prescribed after 5 years anyway. In other words, we cannot collect it, and we do have instances where customers are on long-term payment plans. So that's why some of the figures go beyond the 5 years. But yeah, that would be an addition.
Councillor Cuthbert. But yeah, you want a supplementary on go?
If you don't mind, yes, just for clarification, am I correct in thinking you can't reclaim it for 6 months, and more than 4 years old you can't reclaim as well?
I'm going to check my understanding with colleagues, Councillor Cuthbert. If we can't come back to you with an answer, we'll provide an answer for members with the meeting.
Right. Yeah, some of this can get quite technical. I see that there is a further question from Councillor Duff. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. My question's on page 13. It's at where am I now? 4.7. It's just to do. It says approximately 77% of council tax customers currently pay by direct debit. I was interested to know whether that's the normal kind of figure or if it's decreased or increased, and what are the other sort of main payments? Is it, are we still, people walking in and paying? Is that the main other method? Thanks.
I'm going to go to Stuart on this because he's very strong about this.
Thank you, Convener. First off, 77% is a very high percentage of council tax customers paying by direct debit. And I'm a particular enthusiast about direct debit because the processing costs are as low as they can really be in terms of recovery. That's a very good thing. My colleague Lynn Brady will provide a little bit more context. What I would say to elected members generally is that our cash collection is, and this may be no surprise, is extremely low in terms of a payment option. Thank you.
I think Lynn Brady also wants to. Lynn, you want to make some comments?
I think Stuart's answered most of that, but I would just add that other payments include banker's order, online payments, people phoning up to make payment over the telephone and by payment card as well.
Councillor Duff, are you happy? Right. I'm not sure if it'll be our last question, but Bailey Ahern, you have a second question.
Yes, thank you. And it's on paragraph 4.19 on page 14. I know it's only a small amount, £1,758.29, but it's for garages and lockups. And I just wonder how long we leave it before they get into a bad debt position, and then do we remove the lockup from them?
Okay, I suspect on that it will be Fraser Cross. Yeah, Fraser. Oh, Stuart, you want to? Elaine. Okay.
Again, thank you for the question. It just depends on the situation of the individual. We work with them to try and reduce that. We would ask them to put a repayment plan in place, and if not, we would seek to take the garage off them. Yeah, that is correct. That is the correct process that we would do.
So roughly how long would we give them then in a bad debt position there? Because it's not a vital service. It's not like it's a house or anything.
Yeah. We've got timelines that we do, but we're quite tailored to that on the individual circumstances, because some people do put the repayment plan in place, they might fall back on it and then put it in place. So given an actual time scale, we don't do that for many of our cases. We work with the individuals, but we look on an individual basis, and then we look at about if it's going to continue where they're not going to be paying it for several months, and we take up to like a 6-month period, and then we start the process of notice.
Billy Ann, right, happy. And I can see no further questions, so I'm going to move to the report. This is an annual report, and what it does is to seek our approval to write off debt and obsolete stock for the 22-23 financial year. I think you all know the council endeavours to collect all the debt due to it, and we have a good record in doing so. There are inevitably occasions when this is not possible. The Head of Finance, Stuart Mackenzie, provided us with a summary of the contents of the report just a few minutes back. What I would like to do is to just highlight a couple of points included within the report. First, in normal years, our year-on-year, our in-year collection rate of almost 98% for both council tax and non-domestic rates really would be quite exceptional achievements. I think you've also, though, got to take it in terms of the context of a cost of living crisis affecting households and businesses across the length and breadth of Perth and Kinross. I think it's a fantastic achievement. Secondly, our in-year collection rate of almost 99% for housing rents is also outstanding. This income funds most of the work in our housing revenue account, including our housing investment programme. I'm sure that everyone on this committee wants to join with me in thanking our staff within local taxes, within housing and on sales ledger for the job that they do. Going forward, I would also like to assure elected members that alternative methods of collection and recovery are being investigated at every opportunity in order to keep future write-offs to a minimum, and we've always done that. Council should also be aware that whenever new or additional information is received by the council that allows us to recover the debt, then the charges will be reinstated and collected. But the in terms of council tax collection rate, the figures we're at, we can't yet compare and contrast with other local authorities in Scotland, but we certainly there and in other areas here, but certainly non-domestic rates too, are right up at the top. I think it is an outstanding achievement, and I just want to thank all those involved. And so finally, I'd like to move the paper. Can I ask for a seconder?
Yes, Convener, happy to second the report. Thanks to the officers for their work in bringing it to us. Obviously, I want to thank all the teams involved in collecting not just the debt, but also in their day-to-day work and contributing to the fantastic payment levels that we have for council tax and in other areas. It's also credit to the residents of Perth and Kinross that they're fulfilling their civic duty by contributing to what we're trying to do as a local authority to such a high extent. I have had conversation with some of the team about possibly softening the first correspondence, the wording of the first correspondence we have with people who have fallen slightly behind with their debt, and I believe work to that effect is ongoing. But generally, I think this is a really positive report in many ways, because a lot of people out there are suffering the effects of the cost of living crisis, and a local authority should be acting in a way to be sensitive when going around collecting their dues. So thanks to all the team involved.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Move on to comment now, and I see we do have an amendment from Councillor Rebick. Councillor Rebick, could you present your amendment? And we have, in fact, paper copies which could be circulate, and also for those coming into the meeting online. Yeah. And Councillor Rebick, I know you, and under Article point 18 of Standing Orders, we do request, where possible, for amendments where it's practicable to be referred by midday the day before, and that's happened. And from what I understand, your amendment is competent, and officers have been informed that just wait until the copies have been circulated.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, no, as I move the amendment, if that's what we do indeed, I just want to make it very clear that I think this is as always in these matters, this is an excellent report. I very much appreciate the prudent and professional way that our teams deal with debt. There is absolutely no criticism intended of that. However, the context of the amendment just reflects the extraordinary circumstances we find ourselves in terms of a steep and worrying cost of living crisis. So I'm wondering if the mover and the seconder would be kind enough to incorporate the amendment and go further and write off all of our food debt, which I believe we can do within the overall sales ledger provision. I do want to stress the one-off and exceptional nature of this request. There's no desire to set precedents, but I do believe that we are in a very almost unique set of circumstances in terms of cost of living crisis, and that is the context of which I put forward this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rebick, and I understand that Councillor Barrett wishes to second the amendment. Councillor Barrett, and then there will be comment from Bailey Alster Bailey and also from Provost McDade. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. I readily second Councillor Rebick's motion and welcome his initiative with the proposal to write off school meal debt. I think school meal debt is one of the prime indicators of families in poverty experiencing financial stress and real hardship, and I'm acutely aware of the impact and stresses that small amounts of debt can have on families. The families who are just about managing but who are hit by unforeseen expense or change of family circumstances, illness within a family member, redundancy, death in a family, and increasingly important nowadays, delays in receiving benefits, particularly at the moment from the Scottish Welfare Agency. Or there's also those families in work but just beyond the universal credit thresholds and not receiving free school meal supports. There has been detailed research and analysis on the scrapping of school meal debt by Aberlour, the children's charity, who identified over £1 million of school meal debt last year across councils in Scotland, and Scottish trade unions have also campaigned for the scrapping of school meal debt. My intention in supporting this motion is to improve one aspect of the Council's response to child poverty and hunger and our support to those families, to demonstrate greater compassion and care towards those families, and to take another step to ensure that no child will go hungry at school or is stigmatised by the processes in place for children to access a meal in school. And I was really heartened by the response that we got in terms of no child being turned away at the entrance to the school canteens for a school meal, and I applaud the service for their approach there. And I don't think that is to diminish the work that this council does and has done to use school meal debt data to target families in need of support. Our welfare rights team have been proactive in organising drives to reach out to families with school meal debt to identify other debts that they may have and entitlements that they're missing, and they have done that through a variety of methods, through benefits, advice and assistance, onward referrals to the CAB or CAP for debt advice, and making full use of the Financial Insecurity Fund to reduce essential debts. And that work must continue and was supported in the budget with additional resource for the welfare rights team. And I really want to commend them on the impact of the comprehensive benefits and financial insecurity eligibility work that they do, which last year saw £10,000 awarded for school meal debt and identified 39 families eligible for that support who were previously missing out in a school meal. So what we're proposing today is consistent with the good practice guidance on school meal debt as was prepared by COSLA in response to the research by Aberlour. We're not forging a new path with this proposal today. Lots of other councils have already gone down the same route: Edinburgh, Glasgow, North Ayrshire, Midlothian, to name just a few. But I do want Perth and Kinross to be in that number. Thank you. And I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Can I now ask Bailey Alster Bailey, followed by Provost McDade?
Thank you, Convener. Obviously, very happy to fully support this amendment. As we heard earlier, it's good that there is the policy that no child will be turned away, but still it's good not to be sort of chasing our tails on this debt and chasing those vulnerable families potentially for this debt. I think just on a procedural note, the thing I'd put in the chat was just that in cases when the administration wants to amend its own motion, it'd probably be more expedient just to move the motion in the amended form in the first place. But of course, what you're doing is obviously competent. I'm not challenging that. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just say to you, Bailey Alster Bailey, that the paper came, you can see all the various appendices, but it did take a little bit of work to drill down on the position on school meal debt and on breakfast clubs, and I thought that, so that's why it's come about in this manner, and I think it's right, I think it's appropriate, and but let us see what others have to say. Provost McDade, and then it will be Councillor Tom McEwen. Xander McDade.
Thank you, Convener, and yes, very happy to support both the motion and indeed the amendment. So if there's a vote, I'll vote for the amendment. But I think it's important that a lot of what Councillor Barrett mentioned in terms of families being able to have this stress taken away from them, it is a very, very small amount of money from our point of view as a local authority spending hundreds of millions. But for these families, the stress that potentially quite small amount of money possibly for us, that on them, the stress of that on them around their children, and everyone knows that anything to do with people's children is always the thing that stresses them out the most, really does take away a real severe point of concern and issue for them, and allows them to focus on other things, and perhaps, as Councillor Barrett said, in these very tough times where people are really struggling to feed themselves, eat and get heat, they're actually taking away this small debt. And I agree with what the Leader of the Council said in terms of the policy that we have of no child will, who presents themselves will not get fed. I think that's an important thing, and but these sorts of measures that are quite small from the big scheme point of view make a really big impact on the families affected. So very supportive of this, and I hope that it gets voted through.
Can I just say that we are indeed minded to incorporate and to accept the amendment in terms of moving this paper, but I think it's only right and proper to hear from other councillors first, because we have to take the amendment as a specific item. So can I call now on Councillor McEwen to be followed by Councillor Duff and then Councillor Shars. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. With regard to the amendment, I'm fully supportive of that, and I look forward to the day where the school meals are free and no debt will actually ever be incurred by primary school people wishing to have their lunch at school. The main comment I wanted to make regarding the housing service lost in this paper, I think, is the hard work that the housing team do to prevent debt, and the amount of work done by the council tax collection team, etc., and actually in debt prevention. There's a huge amount of work goes into that and effort supporting families to ease this off. Obviously, this paper at Finance and Resources focuses on the money aspect of things, but there's a lot more, a bit like the duck in the water, there's a lot more goes on under the surface than we're seeing here in this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McEwen. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. Just firstly to thank Lynn Law and Mr Mackenzie and his team for the report. It's a sad fact of life that some people, very often through no fault of their own, do find themselves in debt, but I'm reassured by the processes that we have as a council that we do everything we can to assist people when they do fall into debt. It's good to see that we're back to the historically high collection rates for council tax and non-domestic rates, and that they're expected to be amongst the best in Scotland, where we have often found ourselves. I welcome the amendment and our approach to the provision of school meals for the least fortunate, and I will be fully supporting the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Convener. I'm just looking at notes from this meeting in the 15th of June last year when we discussed this exact same topic, and I'm very supportive of the amendment as it's written. But at that point, it said that our current debt at that point was £20,000. We're obviously working very closely with our families, trying to signpost them to relevant parties to support that, and our schools are working very closely with parents. So I'm kind of concerned that a year down the road we're still in this position, and I would really hope that we would take seriously the opportunity to work even more closely with families, so that this isn't something that in a year's time we're discussing again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. I think we've got broad agreement, consensus on this. However, just properly, I don't have any further comments here, but does the proposer and seconder of the one amendment wish to make any further comments? And then, no.
No, all good. Thank you, though, Convener. Appreciate that.
Okay, right. I'd like to move the report and with incorporating the amendment. Okay, we have agreement. Right.
Yeah, thanks very much, Convener. Obviously, I'm glad to see the amendment come forward. Was work done between the print of the papers and today, and I'm grateful for the discussions that's been had with various parties before we brought this amendment through, and their support that the amendment brought by Councillor Rebick and Councillor Barrett would have support, and I'm glad that we have support across the chamber. It's really welcome. It was a means of taking an officer's report who didn't have the authority to add this extra part into the report that we got there. So really good result. Really happy to accept this into the motion, and I think I welcome the cross-party across the chamber support for the amended motion. So thank you.
Thank you, colleagues.
Right, so we're agreed, and with the amendment incorporated, we now move on to the last item on the agenda today, and that's the Service Annual Performance Report for Corporate and Democratic Services. This was a report that was considered by Scrutiny and Performance this morning, but I think it may be that also, we clearly have to consider with Finance and Resources. So could I ask Karen Donaldson to introduce the report and speak to it?
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, elected members. I am pleased to present the Corporate and Democratic Services Annual Performance Report for the second time today. So apologies to anyone who may have been at committee this morning or tuning in for that. The Corporate and Democratic Services Annual Performance Report presents the opportunity to share with members the breadth and reach of the services we provide and the impact we have in all areas of the Council's work. Our annual performance report also sets out the improvements that we have made, with many involving programmes of work that continue into this year. We've also taken the opportunity to describe things that didn't go quite according to plan and our insight and learning from that. The annual performance report describes progress against the 6 priority themes that were set out in our business management and improvement plan last year, giving examples of what we've achieved and also next steps. From the elected members briefing that was issued on the 30th of May, members will be aware that 2023-24 is a transitional year in terms of our performance reporting arrangements. However, that does not mean there's any less focus on managing and improving the performance of our services. Every Corporate and Democratic Services team actively reviews operational performance and is involved in continuous improvement activity. However, fundamental redesign of key areas of support services is underway, covering property, HR and OD, finance, strategic commissioning and procurement, and also customer services. Each of these projects is unique, but at their core, they will bring together appropriate activities which are currently dispersed across various teams in the Council, standardising and streamlining processes, improving business systems, and making best use of talent across our organisation. And all of this work is designed to enable us to become a more effective and efficient organisation. The Corporate and Democratic Services Annual Performance Report sets out how we connect and collaborate with teams across the Council, with partners and also with the people of Perth and Kinross. We support and enable the delivery of services, act as strategic enablers of change and transformation, support democratic processes and civic functions, and also manage the governance framework. And I would personally like to take this opportunity to thank colleagues across Corporate and Democratic Services for their commitment, their professionalism and their resilience in all that they do. I am joined by a range of colleagues from across the service today, and we are very happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, we do have at least a couple of questions. Can I first of all ask Councillor Rebick, followed by Councillor Cuthbert, followed by Councillor Illingworth. Councillor Rebick.
Thanks again, Convener. I think my question relates to page 34 and it's 7.1 in the conclusion. It says responding to the increasing and changing needs of our communities as they too recover from the pandemic and deal with the cost of living crisis. I think that we do that directly with Latham for All, but I just wondered if there was, if I'm correct in that assumption, and if there was any comment about that. Thank you.
I think you are correct in saying that, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I tried to get in first because it's my question's on the first page, but John beat me to it. My question relates to APR. In terms of finance, this is the annual percentage return. I'm assuming this means the annual performance report, and really it's a request that we don't use acronyms in reports because some of us struggle with them. So does it mean annual performance report?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes, APR stands for Annual Performance Report. Apologies if that's caused any confusion. Apologies for that.
Okay. Terminology. Councillor Illingworth, followed by, I'll take the first question from Councillor McCool, and then I'll come to our second one after Councillor Duff has a chance to say something. Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you, Convener. I'm concerned to see that staff absence is creeping up again. How do these figures compare to pre-lockdown? Because the two years that are there are lockdown years where probably people didn't need to report sick.
Does Pauline Johnson, is she online?
Yeah, I can answer that.
Thanks.
In terms of the pre-pandemic levels, the sickness absence is actually higher than where we were prior to the pandemic. In 2018-19, the teaching figure was at 8 days, and 22-23 it's at 8.9. And 18-19, for all other non-teaching staff, the figure was 10.3 days, and it's currently sitting at 13. So the figure has went back to pre-pandemic, but slightly higher than where we were before. And that might be due to societal changes, some people with colds, flus, underlying conditions as a result of the COVID pandemic, and potential burnout in terms of people working above and beyond during the pandemic and have little resistance left.
Thank you, Pauline. Councillor Illingworth, follow up.
Do we know when the next staff engagement survey is coming up? Because that's, I mean, staff absence and staff engagement surveys are the key measures of engagement. We need to have high engagement.
Pauline?
The next planned staff engagement survey is September.
Okay, well, we'll all look forward to seeing that.
Okay, thanks.
That'll be in September. Thanks, Pauline. I'm going to turn to Councillor McCall now with your first question.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Karen, for the report. My question is on page 52 of the report in relation to the Test of Change project with Angus and Dundee councils to identify efficiencies and improvements via collaborative procurement. Was there not previously a Tayside procurement consortium in place that, for one reason or another, has no longer exists, and why do we think this one will provide benefit?
Councillor Donaldson, if I could answer that.
Yeah, Stephen Crawford.
Councillor McCall, the Tayside Procurement Consortium predates me, but this has been proposed by, or the brief was created originally by Scotland Excel across all three authorities, and I've got the buy-in of my equivalents in Angus and Dundee, and I suppose I can't answer for why it wasn't done before. We are looking at all the spend, all the technical FM, hard FM spend across all three authorities, and what synergies in procurement and efficiencies in procurement we can do from that exercise as a standing start exercise.
Councillor McCall.
I just have a follow-up, if I may, to that.
Sorry.
Just a point of clarification, if I may.
Yeah, far away. Stephen.
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Could you ask again?
I can, thank you. Does this collaboration include a Tayside contract? So I believe we're involved in the Tayside Procurement Consortium previously in its previous iteration. Thank you.
Yes, it does include Tayside contracts.
Can I just suggest the paper's then corrected to include Tayside contracts? Thank you.
Okay. To Karen. Next question is from Councillor Duff. Councillor Duff. Followed by Councillor Butler.
Thanks, Convener. My question's on page 45. It's to do with records management, and I note the comment there that we still hold several thousand storage boxes of paper files which require to be digitised, archived, destroyed in accordance with our records management policy. I just wondered if, you know, are we behind where we should be with this, or is this something that's, you know, just a fact of life and that we're working way to bring that down to zero. Thanks.
Yeah. I think probably, yes, and it's down here. Lisa, you're going to answer that one.
So I'll answer the easy bit first, Councillor Duff, which is yes, this is just a fact of life. The second part, which is your first question, is we're actually ahead of in a lot of places. The electronic document management system that we rolled out managed to capture and digitise a significant number and allowed us to, we've got an ongoing programme of destruction in accordance with our records management policy, and we are looking to develop a further extensive programme to digitise and categorise the unstructured records that we hold in various other systems, etc. So from our point of view, huge amount of work ahead, but we are definitely not behind the curve.
Councillor Duff, happy? Okay, we now move to Councillor Barrett, and then it's Councillor McKeown.
Thanks, Convener. My question's on page 49 of the pack and page 50, and it was about the transfer to implement Mosaic as the Council's new social care system, which was due to go live September, October this year, but is now delayed until February, March of next year. I just wanted to ask the Chief Operating Officer how firm that rescheduled timescale was, and on page 50 there's mention of the move of the HR and payroll system resource link to a cloud-based system which was due to be achieved this month following a delay, and just wanted to check whether that was on track as well, or whether the my view issues that we had last week were part of that, Karen.
I think on that I'm going to take first of all Karen to initially answer as regards Mosaic. I remember that's an issue that came up very early days when I was elected in 2017 on audit, the replacement for the SWIFT programme. So maybe first of all, Lisa, but it might be Jackie Pepper wants to come in on this if she is available. And on the question of moving to cloud-based solutions, I suspect possibly Lynn Harris may be the best, but Karen, could you answer first of all?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to defer to my colleagues in IT to answer the question on Mosaic. However, I'm happy to answer the question about the transfer to the cloud. We have successfully migrated all of our information to the cloud, which is later than planned, but that went well, and that was why the system was down earlier this week, to allow that migration and the appropriate checks and tests to be undertaken. So that has gone well, and that's successfully implemented, and I'm going to hand over to it will either be Alan Taylor or Sandy Strathern to answer the question on Mosaic.
Okay, Alan.
Yes, I'll let Sandy come in with more comment, but basically the original date, as it says in the text on the left-hand side, was the supplier's proposed project plan. Obviously, we worked with the supplier, as it says in the right-hand side, and we've come up with a joint date for go live in February or March 24. That is currently on track. We have a board chaired by Jackie Pepper that meets regularly, and we have a steering group chaired by myself which also meets regularly, and Sandy Strathern is with us in case there's anything that he actually wants to add. But we also have external support from a company called BetterGov, so that possibly addresses your question, Councillor Barrett, but I'll ask Sandy if he wants to add anything to what I've said.
No, thanks, Alan. I've nothing to add. That's exactly correct.
Okay, Councillor Barrett, you happy? Right. I'm now going to move on to Councillor McKeown, and then on to second questions, and that's in order, Councillor McCall, and then there's another one from Councillor Duff. Councillor McKeown.
Thank you, Convener. And in reference to page 17 of the appendix, discusses the work by the Welfare Rights team, obviously busier than they have been in the past, but with a 100% satisfaction from their customers' feedback, which is obviously excellent. They have been a lot busier. They've had the Financial Inclusion Fund to assist. There have been local low-income support funds. They've had Scottish Government Cost of Living Awards. They've had UK Government energy schemes to implement, etc., etc. The question in all this, rather than just listing off all the great things the Welfare Rights Team have done, is that they mentioned that they've had to maximise the use of data and to be able to engage with people earlier. And I'm wondering how they've changed their practice over the last year to accommodate all this extra work and all the extra schemes that have come in both from the Scottish Government and from the UK Government and from ourselves here at the Council.
Which council officer would, is Nicola Sullivan online? Either Lynn Brady or Nicola Sutherland.
Good afternoon. Hi. How we've maximised the use of data? Is that what you were asking?
Yes, generally, and how you were able to engage with tenants or customers earlier.
We've used some council data to proactively target people who have debts, who are in a debt situation through Financial Insecurity Fund. And we've also, through school dinner debts and other debts owed to the council, and by administering the Financial Insecurity Fund itself, that allows us to provide comprehensive benefit checks to people when they make applications to us. We also offer seamless referrals to anyone who's been refused free school meals to make sure that they're getting all their statutory entitlements. There's loads of different ways that we do it. We work closely with Aberlour. We work with PCAVs, Citizens Advice Bureau. There's loads of partnership working that goes on. I reckon if that answers your question.
You're happy, right? I don't know if Lynn, you want to add anything?
I would just add to what Nicola's saying, we take, the Welfare Rights Team takes any opportunity, any contact, any information as an opportunity to try and to get into a family, especially those that are hard to reach, to provide assistance and try and get sustainable assistance there as well, if we could possibly do it, and cash first, obviously, if that's at all possible. Hopefully that's covering what's getting asked.
Thanks. Yeah, and indeed, I suspect we're going to be hearing further down the road on cash first. Thank you, Nicola and Lynn. Right, next question is second question from Councillor Sheila McCall. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. My second question is also in relation to procurement. It's on page 59 of the report around the redesign of strategic procurement and commissioning. I normally associate commissioning with social care or social services. Is that part of the scope?
Lisa.
Clearly, social health and social care commissioning is quite a distinct function, but because they do work closely with the corporate procurement function. And we're also looking at commissioning in its very widest sense. So taking the practice and the theory around commissioning in health and social care, how can we then translate that to a corporate model to ensure that we are actually properly identifying need, making sure that we're identifying the right solutions to put in place to meet need, and then how do we then link that into the procurement activity that surrounds that. So they are not directly within the scope of the project, but they are working very closely alongside. That's one of the transformation projects that's currently leading. And in the course of the feedback and updates on transformation, when that's fleshed out, that'll be reported back in due course.
Okay, and yes, indeed, strategic commissioning procurement is going to be a key element of the transformation process. I think it will be the final question, unless somebody does come in just now, is Councillor John Duff. Councillor Duff.
Thanks, Convener. My question is possibly for Mr. Taylor. So on page 56, and it talks about customer-facing online processes, and we've developed 122, of which 96 are active, and it also says we've 27 internal online processes, of which 20 are active. And I just wondered what the situation is with the other inactive ones at this moment in time. Thank you.
Alan?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Duff. Certainly for the external processes, we set up processes as requested by services for particular purposes. So I would imagine the majority of the services that are no longer active and were externally facing were set up for things like COVID grants. So basically, some of what we set up as an online service is there for a particular purpose, and some of those purposes are time limited. I would imagine that it's a similar kind of issue for the internal ones, where we've either set something up that replaces it, or it was again set up for a particular purpose that's no longer required. Hopefully that does answer your question, but Lynn Harris is also on the call if you do want more detail than that.
Councillor Duff?
No, thanks very much. I was obviously just concerned when I read it that perhaps there were some issues with the ones that were inactive or perhaps hadn't been made active at this point in time, but that explains it. I think that's probably satisfactory. Thank you.
Yeah, as you know, Councillor Duff, the satisfaction ratings for these processes remain incredibly high. So we actually have an average of 4.4 out of 5 stars for the processes that we do online, and we monitor that regularly and check the feedback that we're getting from our customers. So there is absolutely no issues at all, although I do realise it can read like that.
Thank
Alan,
you.
thank you. Right, there being no further questions, I'm sure there will be some comments in a minute. I'm now going to move the report. I think we all know that Corporate and Democratic Services does provide a broad, wide range of professional and technical knowledge, of skills, of expertise to support elected members and teams across the Council. CDS also delivers important frontline services as well. This will be I think most members are aware of the changes that are going to be made. Some of you will have heard and before, but also this morning, Charlene Guild with the new reporting process, where we're not just going to look at the past, but also improvements that we can make in the future. I won't go into all the details on that. What I do want to do is to point out this annual performance report. It not just covers a diverse range of activities and services provided, but I think it's important to highlight 3 key areas which we have followed over the last year. Number 1 is on tackling climate change. Number 2 is on tackling poverty. And number 3 is on transformation. On climate change, we've seen really immense volatility in energy markets, spiralling costs of gas and electricity for everyone. Although I think one notices recently, for instance, in the wholesale price for gas, there's been quite a marked fall. When that feeds through, though, on a wider basis, has got to be seen. But what we've seen by the Council is a combination of good practice, of effective data monitoring, and a proactive end user engagement. And we've achieved, I think, impressive results. Tariff, carbon conversion factors, some of these, a number of these factors are out with our control, but what we've achieved is A, energy consumption has been reduced by 12% year on year. If you take it since 2012, it's a 35% reduction. That's quite marked. If you take it on carbon emissions, we've seen a 14% reduction in CO2 compared to the previous year. And if you take it again since 2012, in terms of the measurements, it's a 58% reduction in CO2. And finally, energy costs were lower, 10% lower than we'd originally projected in 22-23. I certainly want to ask more on this going forward, and just in terms of pre-purchase of energy, but I think that's probably for another day. Secondly, tackling poverty, and we've made strenuous efforts in terms of income maximisation through benefit entitlement, and there's everything we've done possible to support families struggling financially over the period over recent months and years. We and to really assist those in our communities dealing with the cost of living crisis. In 22-23, the council helped local people access approximately 6.5 million in benefits. That's up 22% year on year. We've promoted seamless referrals to other benefits and services as part of our commitment to tackling poverty, and that helps to ensure that people are able to access all available sources of funding, whether it be Scottish Government schemes or local schemes that we ourselves have created. And finally, and I can't stress enough, is the transformation process. And one or two of the areas that have been in terms of the consolidation and redesign of our corporate functions. And this is about public sector reform. Some of those aspects have been referred to already, but it includes finance, human resources, and organisational development, property, customer services, and also, I mentioned a moment ago, strategic commissioning and procurement. And these are just some of the first phase projects in the transformation and change strategy that Council approved last year. We're going to be hearing rather a lot more about that. We're going to have a very heavy agenda for our next finance resources meeting on the, I think it's on the 13th of September, because we will be back to the usual revenue and capital monitoring and treasury reports, but it will be a number of substantive reports on transformation, and we've really got to proceed with this and to assure that we have a more streamlined, a more effective council that can deliver for the needs of all the peoples in our communities. So I'd like to move the report, and can I ask for a seconder?
Thanks, Convener. I think you've covered most of the points there, so I can be reasonably brief. I'd like to thank all the officers for bringing this paper and making it, apart from the one thing picked up by Councillor Cuthbert about APR, that the report is easy to read and is understandable. We as a local authority are going through a lot of change just now, which is necessary for a whole variety of reasons that we have to move forward and change. And so I'd like to thank everybody that's been involved and the wide remit that the CDS has. And sometimes it just is another acronym that you don't really know what they all do. So I really like to actually, it gives an insight into all what's covered by that, and I'd like to give my thanks to everybody. The one thing I will pick up in seconding this motion, this paper, is that welfare rights. It's the way that welfare rights are operating that we would I think all elected members want to see the local authority operate. When they have an in to a family through either an application for one benefit or they're referred by another agency, they use that in to maximise what the family needs, finds out more about the family, and then can help them to better outcomes. And that's what we have to do across the local authority, is with different services, sharing information to get the best outcomes rather than just doing the stick and plaster of what's presented to you. We then look to what's behind the problem that's in front of you and see if we can alleviate it across all services. So well done to everybody, but especially the welfare rights team. Thanks. And I'm happy to second this report.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Right, in order, move to Councillor McCall for comment, Councillor Rebick, and then Councillor Duff. Councillor McCall.
Thank you. My comment's a little bit of a grammatical pedant. The use of the word scope when it's used to describe the scope of a project, if it can have it not capitalised, I think that would be helpful to the reading of the documents. Thank you.
Okay, that was succinct and to the point. Councillor Rebick.
I'm not sure mine will be quite succinct, but I'll try. There's a couple of comments actually. I just want to echo Councillor Leader's comments about the holistic approach that our welfare rights team take is superb and should be commended. But also I think it's important to note that corporate and democratic services generally, I think, are doing a great job in trying to deliver the corporate priorities that elected members have agreed, and I think that's really important and welcome. A very specific point, I think, about staff absence, and I make this point humbly, but it might be worth noting. I think it's about societal attitudes. I think pre-COVID, I think when people had a sniffle or an illness or an ailment, the social attitude was stiff upper lip, let's go into work and bash on and horse on, and that's what we're meant to do. I think because that changed through COVID when you were actually meant to keep away from your work, and I think there's a legacy of that, and people do now consider sometimes that they don't want to pass their ailments on, and therefore they will work from home or be absent. And I think that's probably why there's been a slight increase post-COVID. That's just my opinion, but it might be worth noting. Thank you.
That wasn't too lengthy. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. Certainly, I welcome the report. I would like to take the opportunity to thank Lisa and Karen and their teams for what is a very comprehensive report and interesting read about the whole scope of the services that they provide. It's wide ranging, and it's you know, it's fascinating just to see the details set out for us in the report. Just to add, I think, a bit to what the areas that were mentioned by the mover and seconder, I would like to say that given what's happened recently in the cyber world, I'm comforted by the comments around about our cyber security and our skills and expertise and response plans in the operations centre. It is you know, an area of crime, I suppose, that is sadly expanding these days, and we need to make sure that we protect our assets very, very carefully. And as you'll be aware, we've seen in the paper some large companies which have succumbed to that just recently. I'm also pleased to see that in terms of record management, we're ahead of our progress in dealing with that side of things. We also have a very high percentage of our operation and buildings which are suitable for current use, which we haven't mentioned, and that's good to see as well. And on a positive note, to very positive comments around about our gender pay gap, which is now in favour of ladies, so that's also good to see. But thanks very much for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Is there anyone else that wishes to make any comment? Okay, just to conclude then, I too would like to thank Karen and Lisa, as many others in corporate democratic services, to thank our people in committee services who do really an outstanding job. Welfare rights, obviously, but there's so many others, you know, and often, you know, are not, in many cases, frontline, but really contribute so much to this council, and I know will contribute a lot more in the months ahead, because we really do, with transformation, we really mean it. It is about changing the shape and the nature of Perth and Kinross Council, and it's not just about delivering efficiencies, if possible constraining costs, but it is, above all else, it's about delivering better services, and services that, you know, the people of our communities require. But I think we're all agreed on this report, and I will just conclude this meeting and remind you that the next meeting of Finance and Resources, which I think will be a bit...
The 20th of...
Oh, there is indeed, I should point out, the next ordinary meeting of Finance and Resources will be on Wednesday 13th of September, but there will indeed be a special meeting of Finance and Resources on Tuesday the 20th of this month, and that is to look at the leadership review and what is involved there. So thank you for your attendance today.